said, what am I doing now?
Yeah.
Just sit down.
I don't know. All right.
I'm
It's
going
up to
to,
you.
yeah, well, you know, these things can't be rehearsed. We never even met.
Right.
But once. And I'm going to read from something important that Claude, I'm sure you know, Reflections on Music. Schnabel did lectures here and there, was very interested in thoughts and ideas. There's also, I'll read a couple of things during our 2 hours, My Life and Music, which was put out by Dover, but I don't think is in print, but you can get anything now on eBay. So you would be stunned at some of his ideas. They're very deep, much more so than the average pianist these days. This is very deep. And we live in an age where, as you know, everyone is an artist. Michael Jackson is an artist, a major artist. When Frank Sinatra died, it was easily said 1,000 times that he was the greatest musician, American musician of the 20th century. Basketball players, chefs, everyone is an artist. They have made this, Streisand as an artist. They're not happy with being entertainers or good ones. Schnabel writes, art comprises works of art and artists. The usual custom to associate quality with this designation is misleading. The expression art is abused when it is applied to a successful result of any given task. Art is a territory in itself. Whatever is originated there, no matter how poor when measured by the summits, belongs to the realm of art. An artist is he who by profession and intention produces art. One must not call him an artist whose activity lies outside of art and there earns particular distinction. The best shoemaker is simply and only the best shoemaker. Even with intuition and skill and soul, he is only a shoemaker. Works of art can be measured only by works of art. Bad oratorios cannot be measured by good shoes. Art is not the only field of creative attainment, of course. As in all branches of production, there are good, bad, and middling works of art, although there is no way of proving these valuations with legal validity, thank God. Possibly a claim to value may be established by the longevity of a work and recognition by the testimony of those who are themselves recognized. Nor is there a patented method for the production of master works. No one can be intentionally original, and no one can be intentionally eclectic. All attempts to associate works of art with the private life or the philosophy of their creators, a favorite pastime of biographers, seem to me both meaningless and dangerous. The creator's attitude outside of his music is without significance for the music itself. Very simply stated, a work of art originates and lives in the space between affirmation and negation. When, where, and to what we say yes or no is entirely unimportant. The power of the statement and not its subject is what matters. It circles about the symbols heaven, hell, earth. The heaven of one may be the hell of another, but he must feel it as such. All emphasis on peculiarities which distinguish works of art from one another tend to divert us from their true nature. The influence of locale and zeitgeist on the work is minimal in comparison with the similarity between all works of art. Society collaborates significantly in artistic creation only through the force of its desire for art. The undeniable fact, apparent in so many lands, that the civilization of art flourishes now, here, now, there, decays again, becomes paralyzed, or dies. This can be explained only by the rise and fall of the demand influenced to some extent, possibly by political conditions. Historical events, therefore, may have influenced, stimulated, or released artistic creation. But artistic creativeness, a power belonging to all humanity, is latent within it always and everywhere. The quantitative exploitation of artworks is also influenced by such propelling forces, and so is the preference for one or the other species of art. Countries and periods, therefore, may well have produced different quantities in different species, but the nature and value of artworks follow only their inherent laws. Great artworks and small ones have their essential qualities in common. Now, as you see, Schnabel is a deep thinker, and I didn't know a word of what he meant. I hope you did, and that's why I read it, because maybe later we'll discuss it. But the point is, he was a serious guy with serious ideas, and indeed I do agree with them, and especially these biographers, you know, who decide, well, Wagner, he hated Jews, so let's in 100 years not play him in Israel or something like that. Let me tell you, a creative act is a very different act from the little piddling person who happens to often transmit it. Claude, I want to start with questions, and how we will do this, as I explained to him, is when you have a large audience, it is not a good idea ever to go into a conversation. Then things get muddled. What I will do is ask Maestro Frank questions, and he'll then answer them one word or whatever he wants, and then I'll go to the next question, and then we can get more information. I wish that we were talking more about you today, but this is the legacy of Schnabel, and what I have noticed is that every lover and disciple and pupil of Schnabel is influenced by him his whole life. My first question is, when did you meet Arthur Schnabel, and why and how long did you study with him, Claude?
I met Schnabel when I was 11. I hate to tell you when that was, but long time ago. And he had a place in Tremezzo, Italy, where he spent part of the summer and the late spring and the early fall. And he invited me to come to play for him, which I did. I was 11. I played louder. Can you hear it now? Oh, should I go like this? Can you hear this better? All right. Nothing worth remembering what I said so far. I was 11.
Met him at 11 and he went to Italy. Do you think that Mr. Frank should sit where I am? Yes. And that would be better for you to able to see him? I think so.
Do you still need this?
Yeah, you never know.
Okay, here you are, okay. Okay.
Better?
Right.
And this thing will be...
Oh, yeah. How about that?
We're off. When, why, and you were 11 years old.
I was 11. I was invited to see him in Italy, where he had a summer place, a spring place, and a fall place, and I played for him. Of course, I brushed up on my whole repertoire to play for him. I didn't realize that he wanted to hear only one or two pieces, which is what happened. I played one Schubert impromptu for him, and it was over. He said, now something else. So I played a Beethoven Rondo, and when that was over, he said, that's enough. Now I talk to your mother, and you go out in the garden. So while I was in the garden, and he talked to my mother, and he said, yes, this was serious, and I should eventually be with him. But I was still, I was 11. I was a little too young for that. He said, I should study with a pupil of his first, either in Paris or in Berlin, and then in about a year or two, I'd be ready with him, and that's exactly what happened. Of course, they had a choice of Berlin and Paris. This was in 1937. You can imagine which one we chose, or which one my mother chose. It was Paris. We went to Paris and had to leave Paris a little earlier than anticipated because Hitler came in, and we all had to leave. We all did leave. We were very lucky. And I ended up in the United States at age 15, and I immediately knocked at Schnabel's door, thinking he'd recognize me. Of course, he didn't. It was 3 years I'd seen him, and I had changed completely. And when I reintroduced myself, oh, welcome, welcome, and how wonderful, and what happened to your finger? I had a bandaged hand because I'd broken a finger. And how long will that be? I said, it'll be in a couple of weeks. He said, well, in a couple of weeks, come again and play for me. And that's what happened. A couple of weeks later, 3 weeks later, I played for him, and he said, yeah, this is all very serious. You're more or less ready to study with me, not entirely by you, only by me, but I'd also send it to my son, who's very good at keeping you in shape, and that's what happened. So I studied with Schnabel and with his son, and this went on and off for 10 years. I mean, there were lots of interruptions, of course. I was in the army for 3 years, that kind of thing. But otherwise, I was actually with Schnabel for 10 years, from 1941 to 51.
Wow, what an experience. And we'll talk a little bit later on one of the questions about his son, Karl Ehrlich, who died a couple of years ago. You can hear everyone? Okay. What were the primary traits of the man? Now, you knew him 11 years. This is really, you must have gotten to know quite a bit.
I knew him quite a bit, yes, and somehow his artistic self and his personal self were really rather separable. And he didn't let on much to his personal self. The lessons were never entirely private. He allowed all the other students to come and listen to it. He only had 3 students at that time. I was one of them. He only had two kids and me. We were all young. He taught now and then. He taught a grown-up, but he didn't tell us about it. He told us about the other kids, and he expected me to be there for the other lessons, and we were. I learned a great deal from Leon Fleischer's lessons, for example. A great deal. In fact, I learned as much from his lessons as I did from mine.
Of course.
Because it was without the pressure. I could hear what Schnabel had to say. Some of the pieces I knew, some of the pieces I didn't know. Whichever it was, it didn't make any difference. It didn't make any difference. What Schnabel had to say in the way of advice was tremendously important to me, and I got a lot from other people's lessons as well as from my own. But I got a lot from my own too.
Wonderful.
I hope. Yeah.
Well, we know you do. Have gotten quite a bit. What was his influence on you morally and artistically?
I would say morally and artistically was his lack of compromise. He did not know. He didn't know. I don't think he could spell the word compromise. I mean, I didn't make him do it, but I think he would have had difficulty. It's just he did not believe in compromise. When I think of his recital programs, for example, at the time, Schnabel had no compunctions about ending a piece with Opus 109, which ends quietly and softly. Nobody did that at the time. Nobody.
Absolutely.
If you end with a Beethoven sonata, it's got to be the Waldstein or the Appassionata or a loud one.
Yes. Well, if you actually philosophically look deeply into the word compromise, if you compromise, you are being immoral.
So he thought. He thought any kind of compromise was an immorality, and he didn't believe in it.
And no compromise can ever work. None.
And no
politically or personally.
Can ever work. That's right. And he stuck to that. He stuck to that in his teaching too. His teaching was terribly meticulous. What one did in a lesson, I would sometimes have a Beethoven sonata prepared, fully aware that I wouldn't play the whole sonata, that I would play at most one movement, and that's what happened. We'd spend one movement of the sonata. He'd sit at his upright piano. He'd demonstrate every note. There was not one note that he didn't play himself.
Well, it seems exhausting, Claude. Was he tired afterward, or no? He really. Well, he knew the music, of course, but even once in a while, Leon Fleischer had a lot of lessons. Once in a while, he'd brought a new piece to him that he couldn't possibly have known. By a new composer. He demonstrated that too, phrase by phrase. This is where the phrase goes, this is where the phrase begins, this is where the phrase ends, and he treated it the same way as he treated Beethoven and Schubert. So you went to him literally till the death in 1951.
That's right. That's right.
How did that death affect you?
Well, it affected me very much.
Sure.
Yeah.
How do you think that Arthur Schnabel would view our world nearly 60 years after his death?
Even more pessimistic than he was at the time. He was very pessimistic, but not it's very strange. He was pessimistic in a superficial way. He was pessimistic, the people who end programs loudly have more applause than the ones who end it softly, that kind of thing. But he knew very well that in the long run it didn't make that much difference. And I think he lived by that. He was pessimistic but optimistic in the long run. He believed in doing what he believed in doing, and that was it. And if people bought it, fine. If they didn't buy it, fine too.
Well, they did buy it. That's amazing.
Well, they did buy it, but he was not as popular later on in his 60s as he had been in his 40s when he was playing a lot in Europe, playing a lot in England. And chances are people got a little bit afraid of him. Tiny bit.
How did he perceive you as a person growing up? He saw you in these formative years from 11 to 21,
I don't think he was interested.
He wasn't interested?
Not really.
Just the musical thing?
Just the musical thing, that's right.
How interesting.
Yeah.
How did he place composition in his life?
Oh, very important. He insisted that his students compose.
Yes,
he actually insisted. Some of us didn't, some of us did. I did badly, but I did. And I told him that. I said, I compose it's badly, I hate it. I write a piece and I throw it away. He said, that's fine. Throw it away, write another piece.
Oh, that's fabulous. Yeah,
but
that's
he meant
fantastic.
that. He meant that too. I think he thought it's the activity of writing, of really getting into the music, gives you an insight in what other composers, what great composers, what real composers thought when they wrote.
Yeah, the idea of people playing their little pieces, killing themselves working on them without understanding that all of this is part of a creative talent.
Absolutely.
That's just a recreative aspect of it.
And he looked beyond that.
Yes.
He did not play his own pieces, by the way. Yeah, I think
Yes.
you know that. It's famous.
He occasionally did a premiere like Nielsen's Suite in 1921.
Really?
Major,
You know more than I do,
a
yes.
major piece.
Was it well received?
Yeah, but I know more than you
Yeah.
about that little detail, but I don't know more about you than when it comes to piano playing.
I see. Right. Yeah. Well,
I want to
I
read
didn't
this little
realize.
moment.
I'm a little disappointed to hear that he played some of his own music. I thought
No, not his own, the suites by Carl Nielsen.
Oh, but that's all right.
Yes.
Oh no, he
Yes.
was very interested in contemporary music.
Yes,
and
very.
playing, but his own music he didn't play.
No. But listen to this, this is so interesting. In an interview, someone said, Mr. Schnabel, would you be willing to tell us whether you prefer composing, playing, or teaching?
Yeah.
Or don't you know?
Yeah.
Mr. Schnabel, oh, I know. I prefer composing.
It's true.
Yet
Yes,
it makes me very sad to think of it. Twice during my life, there were long intervals in which I did not compose. Together, they lasted nearly 20 years, from 1905 to 1914, knew it exactly, didn't he? And from 1925 to 1935. Asking myself why I did not compose, I could find only one answer, that the urge probably was not strong enough during that period. But all my composing was done as a kind of hobby. Officially, I am not a composer. The world says I'm a pianist. Oh, so my composing was a kind of hobby, but what a love affair. I did it always during my vacation in the summertime. The voice said, did you feel that you were cheating then when you composed? Mr. Schnabel, cheating? That's a word he didn't get. Yes. No, not exactly, I guess. I am very happy composing. I'm not even interested in the value of my compositions. He said the same thing.
He meant that too.
Just interested in the activity. Right. Few of my compositions are published. That is, however, partly my fault, for I took a rather haughty, wrong attitude towards them when I could have had them published. They are very seldom performed, too. It is getting more and more difficult to have compositions of the type I am writing performed because they are expensive to publish, and in money terms, they are certainly not promising of success. And they certainly have had none at all. But we are going to, not quite yet, Donald, but we are going to hear a couple of Schnabel piano pieces. But let's get back to our questioning. I just wanted to...
Just one more thing about his attitude towards composing. He very often said to his students, when it came to a phrase, to a left hand somewhere, he said, suppose you had written that. Suppose you had written that. How would you hear it? How would you like to hear it sounded? And it awakened them. It awakened.
Fantastic stuff.
Fantastic. He said that, of course, a lot to the young people who didn't compose at all, and he knew that, but it didn't matter. He said he believed in composing, and if he had written it like he said it to me very often with the left hand, that I played not phrasedly dum da 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 instead of yum da 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 dum da 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 something like that. Well, if you had written that, wouldn't you play dum da 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 dum da 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 da? I said yes. I had to admit yes, I would. Well, play it like that, even if somebody else has written it.
It's a major piano lesson right there. Yeah. Well, it comes out of a tradition that is immensely composable, so to speak. I mean, he's born in 1882, and if you actually looked in dictionaries of artists, you would find that specific year, for some strange reason, the most born year in the history of all the performing arts. Everyone, or even the composers, Stravinsky, Ernest Bloch, or around that time. 1882 was also Friedman, 1882 was Bartók, 1880, go on and on and on. Painters by the thousands. 82 was a very good year in bed. What was his appeal? That his concerts were filled, not just like Horowitz, every pianist in the world would crawl there.
Right.
Yeah. But with intellectuals, with writers, with poets, with thinkers, very much different. The only person that I think that had that same appeal was Landowska.
Yes.
How did that happen, that he created a different kind of audience, very serious one?
Yeah, well, I've never been asked that, but I'll improvise my answer.
Yes.
I think it had to do with, as you pointed out already, with the singularity of his approach. You see, there was nothing general about the way he played. He obviously was not seeking praise. Obviously not.
Yes.
And he was verbal about that too. He said, don't worry about success. Don't worry, let success happen. If it's deserved, you'll have it, but don't worry about it.
It's wonderful. There's a wonderful moment where he writes to his wife. He happens to be around 1905, and he's 1910, and he's playing in Seville. And the Spanish audiences were so bad, it was unbelievable, worse than the Italian. And he says, and I am playing the Diabelli variations.
I believe it.
And I feel so sorry for them having to listen to this 50 minutes because I was certainly the only one in the hall enjoying it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, he believed in that.
And what did he teach? Were there certain works that you were not, that you wanted to study that he wouldn't teach?
No, he didn't ask me. He didn't ask me before what I was going to play, and he would not have forbidden anything.
Really?
There were some things that, well, like when I came to study with him, I did not play Opus 111 for him. I didn't start with that.
Sure.
He wouldn't have liked that. He would have said, no, play an earlier one, get into the business of that. But it didn't come to that.
Yeah.
So I was a little wise that way. I didn't.
You didn't,
yeah.
It's like a Rouse saying once, he said, everyone today begins their career with 111. I end mine with it.
Yeah, very good. He said that.
Yeah,
fantastic.
Rouse, he said that.
Fantastic.
Did Schnabel discuss his colleagues with you? Let's say Edwin Fischer, born in 1886.
The word discuss is a very polite word. Yes, he mentioned. Yes, he did mention the colleague sometimes. But he was not a good colleague from that point of view. No.
Really, like Mozart?
No, like Mozart. He liked the pianists that believed in him, of course. And he talked nicely about them. But the real so-called competitors, no, he had criticism for everybody. He did have criticism for absolutely everybody. I remember one singular experience I had with him. He said the other day I turned on the radio and I heard Brahms' Rhapsody. Decently played, very decent. It was
so
not
that was
inspired.
a big thing, yeah.
Oh, it was a big thing for him. It was not inspired, but it was good. And I said to myself, that must be Rubinstein. Sure enough, it was Rubinstein.
Because Rubinstein always is decent. Yeah, it reminds me of one day I'm waiting for Horowitz on a Sunday, and he always listening to the news, and and WQXR constantly on, and he came down, and I said, well, any good news? The only good news is that I know that Verkushny sure does play Schubert very well.
Yeah, that's lovely, but that's very nice.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah.
So that makes me feel good that, Schnabel, this Olympian creature, could...
Oh, yeah, he was competitive. Oh, yes.
Now, 11 years, what possibly irritated you about him? Anything?
Who says 11 years?
I mean, from, your
10 years.
10 years with him.
Don't add.
Sorry.
10 years is enough. No, it was wonderful.
Well, then it's a good question.
I could have gone on forever. Yes.
You could, yes.
What was your question?
The question was,
It's not funny.
instead of you being irritated with me about the year, I ask you, what were you irritated ever about him? Anything?
I must say, I was, of course, I was 15 when I started with him, and I was 25 when I ended with him. I ate up everything he said. There was very, very little that I disagreed with. Very little. Now and then, a diminuendo here and accelerando here. I'm beginning to now play things a little differently from the way I studied with him. I'm beginning to disagree with a few things, but very little. He was terribly, terribly, without wanting to be, he was very dictatorial. And of course, he had the great advantage of playing everything for everybody. When he said, make diminuendo here in the second voice and crescendo in the third voice, whatever it was, he went to the piano, he played it, it sounded beautiful. So of course one wanted to do it. And he played everything, every note that one brought to him, he played.
Yet your recordings, which are so beautiful of the Beethoven sonatas, the complete Beethoven sonatas, they're not imitations in any way of Schnabel. Oh, God, no.
Yeah. He wouldn't have liked that.
He wouldn't have liked that.
No,
yes.
he wouldn't have liked that. He wouldn't have liked that.
But some dictatorial teachers, really do want that.
Yeah, oh, sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
How was practicing a chore for him?
Yes, he didn't do it. He didn't do it. Well, when I went with him, it was in 1941. He was ready to figure it out. He was already over 50, so he thought he didn't need it. And the way he played, he didn't need much practicing because he didn't work out things technically. No, he was a little sloppy, tiny bit sloppy, as everybody knows. Yes. And he didn't mind. He didn't mind it. He said the time he spends looking at the insides of the piece, and the philosophical insides of the piece, and composing myself, he said, I don't have time to really work it out.
Understand. That's for children.
That's for him, that was for children.
That's for children. Did he feel special as a musician? I mean, did he know that he was the great Schnabel, or was he a modest man?
Well, no, he was not modest, no. Yeah. I don't think he was modest. He talked very modestly. He talked modestly, but I could tell that he thought very highly of himself, as he should have. I remember once very specifically this girl called Hilda Banks, who had a lot of lessons, who studied with him the Opus 31, number 1 in G major. Comes to the second movement, Adagio Grazioso. It's called Adagio Grazioso. And he said, I'm afraid you don't quite catch on. He said, he very rarely said that to students. He thought, he was always positive, how can you do it better, how can you do that? No, he didn't quite catch on. It's Adagio Grazioso, it's of course a very difficult description of a movement, Adagio Grazioso. Adagio means, as we well know, very leisurely, we have time. And Grazioso means a certain grace to it. How can you combine the two? He went to the piano to play the opening of that movement. And then he said, it's not that I played that well. This is the kind of thing you have to do.
I understand. How did he feel about his great accomplishment, which was unique at that time? In the 30s, he was the first to ever record all of the Beethoven sonatas. So it was a long process from Beethoven's time, where Beethoven only heard the Appassionata and an actual public concert, till the recording of all 32 sonatas. Did he feel that was his major accomplishment?
No. In fact, I didn't discuss it with him, but I'm sure he didn't, because he didn't really believe in recording. It was against his nature, recording. To think that that something would be played the same way 3 times, was unheard of to him.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Yeah. Here comes one more before we actually hear the great pianist play. Someone says, about what's going on today. More people like records, this and that. He said, I think most mechanically reproduced music remains a kind of substitute.
That's right.
The acoustic reproduction is not quite genuine. There was always, at least for my ear, some change. Still, I think it is understandable if some people are now content to listen chiefly to records, even prefer it to being present in the concert hall. That was already starting the moment radio came on in records. At home, they have a choice of what to play, yes. They can repeat it, and they are more intimate in contact with it, while in the concert halls, programs are generally so mixed and sometimes so questionable that the more sensitive listeners do not go. There are very musical people, more of them than ever perhaps, who go to concerts only when the programs attract them. When something is played which they have not heard before or have not heard before, they want to hear it, especially, so they go. Otherwise, they would rather use their gramophone or listen to the radio. However, there is a contact, let me say a vibration that is so special between living beings. At the concert, there is a living listener and a living performer, while when a record is played, there is only one living being and one object, which is, in a way, dead. So this contact, this vibration is lost. Through music, though music really does not address itself to the optical sense, there is something about attending an original production and being in the same room with the performer. You react differently. And of course,
Beautifully put.
Everything in this book is beautifully
And
put.
this was how long ago that he wrote?
1944.
Quite something.
Yeah. He was asked to give a group of lectures and interviews in Chicago, and he did. And the other book is a group of just reflections on music. The first one that I didn't understand.
Yeah, I don't know. I've read that several times. I still don't understand.
I'm glad to know that.
Right.
Did he ever speak about his teacher Leshetitsky or Paderewski or any of those, or his surviving pupil Horzhowski?
Well, no, very little, very little.
Yeah.
I don't think he believed in the teachers. He did everything differently.
Yeah.
He didn't imitate anybody.
Claude, what do you think about his elaborate Beethoven edition in our age of her texts? Is it very valuable to you?
His edition
Yes.
of Beethoven, I think it's immensely valuable to me. He, of course, hated it. He didn't like it anymore. When I studied with him, it was long ago that he had written it, that he had published it, and he said he wishes he hadn't done it because it was very much misunderstood. But if one studied with him and one could tell which was misunderstood, which was easily misunderstood, there's tremendous benefit. It's, of course, I don't know if for those of you who know the edition, it's tremendously meticulous.
Oh.
He had a reason for every note.
Yeah. One musical line, and then the whole page of could be of detailed discussion.
And one had to know him. One had to know him to get into that. If one knew him, it's tremendous. And I still consult it. I don't study with it, but I consult it.
Yeah. Well, I think every student should have it, certainly.
Should have it.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Did he have certain thoughts that he communicated to you on the Schubert sonatas, which I feel, certain moments in the Schubert sonatas have never been rivaled, never have been.
I agree. He didn't discuss it much, but I think he was well aware that he played Schubert particularly beautifully. And he played Beethoven particularly beautifully too. But other people did too. You see, with Schubert, it was the Schubert belonged to him.
Yes, it belonged to him.
It belonged to him, yes.
And we're going to hear right now a Schnabel performance of the cataclysmic and beautiful F-sharp minor movement from the A major posthumous sonata, literally written as Schubert is dying at age 31. I think that this performance is beyond belief.
Yeah.
Let's hear it.
Okay.
Put the lights out. Okay.
And that was before splicing.
Yes, before splicing.
Yeah, very fantastic.
Well,
Very beautiful. Very
like an
moving.
angel
Very-
passes in the
very-
sky.
That's right. Very
Yeah.
moving.
There must have been something angelic in the man somewhere.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. Definitely. Yes.
Did he ever talk of more metaphysical things, as he does in some of these essays, about the nobility of the human spirit or any of that stuff?
Very little. Very little.
Of course, you were 15 when he began. Did he ever say, "Do you go out on dates"? None of that.
No, 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 no.
No. They didn't say, don't hurt your hands playing
No, no, no,
baseball
no.
or anything.
No, 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 no.
Yes, this was a wondrous Teuton, huh?
That's right. A wondrous Teuton.
A wondrous Teuton. What he says that composing means everything to him, but I mean, obviously, he gave such immensities of energy to teaching.
I know, yeah. I'm not sure whether he really meant that about composing.
Yeah.
I think he said a few things for effect.
Yeah. And you know what?
Yeah.
We all do.
Exactly. Half the things I say are for effect.
Yeah. Fortunately, they're not printed. So.
That's right.
Schnabel once said, "God protect me from my disciples." What did that mean?
Just that. He didn't want to be quoted, yes. I quote him, but always with condition, I explain the quotations.
Was he interested in a hobby? Was there anything outside of music?
He did sport, he played tennis.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't see him playing tennis.
Well, I didn't either. I think he played before I knew him. But
It's like Chopin hunting.
And he walked a lot. I think he walked.
He was in good shape.
He was in good shape. Yeah.
Claude, I want to ask you, did you ever study any of his music and play it anywhere?
I played his piece in 7 movements.
Oh.
But he was already dead when I played it, so I had no chance of playing it for him. I think had I played for him, I know exactly what we'd have done. Microphone. Sorry. I didn't have a chance to play his piece in 7 movements because he was already dead by the time I'd finished learning it, which it took me several months to learn it. It really is.
Yes, it's
very,
tough,
very
yeah.
difficult. Had I played it for him, I know exactly how I would have treated it, like Mozart and Beethoven. He would have gone phrase by phrase, and you don't give it the right curve, you don't give it the right crescendo. He would have treated it exactly like the music that he worshipped.
Wonderful. I want to continue. We have, as you know, a performance of the Opus 109, and I'd like now to listen to Schnabel's slow movement of the, or some of it at least, of the Emperor Concerto 1947. It's very, very beautiful. And Joe, you recorded those Schnabel pieces for Don very wonderfully. He said you did not need his cell phone speech today, that he has you trained. When you played it in public, how did it go over, the dance suite?
It's not the dance suite, it's the piece in
Oh,
7
this,
movements.
yeah.
Not terribly well.
Yeah.
No.
Well, at least now,
No.
if he's up in heaven, he knows that some of it's being published and played. So,
Sure.
if you wait long enough, sometimes it works.
Sure.
Magnificent. I think the London Symphony with Galliera. Jerry Rose wanted me to say that in a sense the Institute here is a legacy of Schnabel's, and that he studied, and the eminent teacher who's in the audience, Victor Rosenbaum, studied with Schur, who was a eminent pupil of Schnabel. And Jerry says that he's so proud to be the grandchild.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, well, what did the master feel about concertos and conductors?
Two different things.
Yes.
Shall we treat each by each one? Concertos, of course. Concertos was part of his life, to play a concerto. So I don't have to go into that. Conductors he didn't believe in. No. He thought conducting was, well, I mean, there were exceptions. Sometimes towards the end of his life, he began to see the light a little bit, and he described to me an experience he had where he heard the same symphony play on consecutive nights. The first night with a young conductor, he knew the score inside out. He gave every entrance, pointed exactly where, exactly, and everything was completely right, completely perfect, and the performance was uninspired. And then the next night he heard Klemperer. He heard Klemperer conduct, and Klemperer was not really prepared for this particular concert. He had the score on the desk. He looked, his head was buried in the score the whole time. He went like this a little bit. And he said, and the performance was inspired from beginning to end. So he believed in it a little bit. A little bit he believed in it, but of course he thought that the whole idea of the conductor was greatly overestimated by the press and by the people who talk about it, you know.
Well, of course it is. I said to Horwitz once, why do you only, in your whole career, you've only played 4 concertos? He said, well, what can you do with a concerto? Hopefully the conductor can count.
And he was Toscanini's son-in-law.
Yes, Toscanini's son-in-law. I said, what was it like to be with Toscanini, you know, as his son-in-law? He said, son-in-law? He was the law. Did the great Schnabel talk about competitions, let's say? He didn't live to see Fleischer as the 1952 winner of the Queen Elizabeth.
No, he just missed that by a year. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he would have been very proud, even though he didn't believe in competitions, but he still would have been very proud.
I love him because he believes in nothing.
Right.
And that's important.
Right.
That's
right.
very important for
right.
world peace. Did he read a lot?
Not at all.
Really?
No. Not one word. Not one word. I remember, but innocently, I once gave him a book for either his birthday or Easter or Christmas, whatever it was. He looked at it and said, "Thank you very, very much. Teresa will read this for me." Well, fine. I mean,
right.
And then I found out later that he did not read books. He could talk about books. Oh yeah, he talked about the books, but
he didn't have to read them.
It sounds funny, but it is so. He didn't have to read them to know what it was all about.
Oh, just what a picture you're drawing. It's wondrous, wondrous. I want to read this.
It was all talent. He was all talent.
It was all talent, yeah. An original, a great creature, a great creature. He says to the person asking a question, he says, when I played the 32 Beethoven sonatas in London, there was a very old gentleman, a great music lover and amateur. He had heard me play once before, and he bought 6 or 7 tickets, all subscription tickets for the whole series. Before the concerts, he invited his friends, played and explained the sonatas to them. Then he came with them to the concerts. And from concert to concert, he became more and more disappointed and disillusioned about my playing. He was near despair, this man. So after the 5th concert, he wrote a 14-page letter to me, a moving letter really, in which he said that if he had known how I played the sonatas, he would certainly not have bought all those tickets. He practically asked me to return the money to him. Then he went on, singling out certain places, writing, for instance, "Why did you hurry in this measure? A man with your technique," and blaming me for many other details which were not according to his expectations, until he reached the conclusion. And then he said, "If you go on like this, Mr. Schnabel, you should stop playing Beethoven altogether." So I sat down and answered the old man. There was not a trace of irony in my letter. I assured him, for example, that he overrated my technical abilities.
Oh, that's charming.
If I hurried, it was simply a defect of my technique. I did not want to hurry, regretted it just as much as he. But then I also wrote in the course of this letter that to buy, here's wisdom, that to buy a ticket is no insurance of happiness. The performer can only promise to try his best, but he cannot promise to please the listener.
Fantastic.
Isn't this
Beautiful.
Fabulous?
Beautiful.
My
Beautiful.
God, my
Beautiful.
God. Well, I think that we are rather ready.
Yeah.
If you are,
Yes, I'm, in fact, I'm ready now, and I'm afraid...
you're ready to leave or to
No, no,
play
no.
the sonata?
Well, factually speaking, I'm ready to leave, but I think I can squeeze in the sonata.
Yes,
If,
and we
with
have to-
your permission, however, I can't stay afterwards. I
Yeah.
do have to run. With the last note, I'm going to have to run.
He has to go on a plane, and he's not exactly, though, sure of when it is, but he knows it's soon.
I found out.
Oh, you found out?
I saw my wife. She's in the car waiting for me.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. All right,
No,
so-
I've just enough time to play the sonata. Yeah.
And I want to say that before we do, I want to ask you, how is your teaching at Yale going? How is Curtis?
It's a
and-
big subject. I happen to love teaching, you know, and for its own sake as well as for preparation for something good. You know, I think if I had to define in what ways my teaching different from other people's teaching is, it's not for a performance or for a career or for a series of performances. It's for the piece.
It's for the
And
piece.
for the relationship of the person who plays to the music.
Yes. And now, with your vast experience with so many students, a pointed question about, you know, there are so many young pianists, and they live in a kind of unconscious, sometimes conscious despair of what the world is about now and where they will go with it and how they will treat music, and they use that disgusting word career all the time.
Yeah.
Career, or these ridiculous competitions that they you know, hope that they will win like a lottery. What do you say to a young pianist, musician, about their longevity in music?
Well, I don't say the same thing to everybody, of course, but I think the gist of what I try to express is, don't think of the career. Let the career happen. If it happens, great. If it doesn't happen, great too, if you play well. The important thing is to play well, in studying, to do everything that you think that music demands. Nobody can do everything that music demands, but a good part of it. And if it's in public, all the better. If it's not in public, then it's for the people who listen and for yourself.